I got the job straight out of university. I was lucky. I didn't know anyone in the city, but it didn't matter. There was a big bar on the ground floor of the office, and my first night there was a mixer for all the new people like me. Everything was free. Endless drinks and no food, and we all got really drunk, but it was fine. There were dormitories in the basement, and we all slept there. I slept there a lot that first year. Everything was so big and loud, and the way they talked about it, everything was great and fantastic, and they kept talking about opportunities and room for growth. Nothing was specific, but everything was pitched at an excited level, just above my understanding. I photocopied things so fast they were a blur. There was a meeting about a possible meeting, and I wrote things down and then typed them up, and there were emails about possible meetings, about possible other meetings. Lunch was on the top floor. There was a man in a chef's uniform making burgers to order, most of them blue or rare, and a pancake-making station. Blood from the burger ran like water down the inside of my wrist. Even then, I think I saw them. Out of the corner of my eye, or when I turned quickly. Sometimes in the enormous mirror-filled lifts there would be a slight burnish to the reflection, as of hands on my shoulders or around my mouth. This was the early sense of them, as not one form but many, like the birds which amassed above the office on windy days. I was excited to be there. I didn't want to be anywhere else. I often fell asleep at my desk with my head on my arms. I drank what everyone else drank at the bar. Champagne, freezing cold chugs of lager. I longed for one of the big offices we were all aiming for, with their glass eyes looking over the city. There was a constant flow and rush, and you were in or out. The lights never switched off. The coffee stations on every corner were always manned. Sometimes we pulled all-nighters in a way I never would have at university. Comrades in arms, firing questions around the room. These nights were the best. The city darkening around us. The bottles we cracked open at 3 a.m, our hands moving on the keys with a frantic energy I felt in my gut. I forgot to phone my mum for months at a time. On New Year's Eve, wishing in the year 2015, I had 5 missed calls from her. But we were partying all night and I kept forgetting to ring back. When we eventually spoke, she said, "But what do you actually do there?" I felt the words before I said them, greasy with freshly cooked burger fat, slick with expensive hand soap. We make things happen. There were small things, uncomfortably gendered. Sometimes when I walked into a meeting ready to give a presentation I'd spent 2 days preparing, one of the older men who came and went in and out of the office would ask me to get everyone a coffee, and, unable to find the words, I would go and do it. And by the time I came back, the meeting would have moved on and no one would have noticed the presentation I'd meant to do hadn't happened. These older men swam in and out, and each time the shoal was disturbed, a shudder running through us, the order displaced. We knew the smell of their aftershave, and the way they took their coffee was so embedded in our brains that sometimes I woke up saying it out loud. From behind they were almost indistinguishable from one another, but from the front, the sharpness of this one's face or the upturned smile of this one separated them. I grew to like the nauseating fear that they instilled, the panic that burned for longer than they were there, fueling us. Of course, also they were handsy, over-friendly, familiar in a way that suggested they remembered what we'd worn last time, but not our names. I was sent out by one to buy a present for one of their wives once. Something sexy. I trawled shops in Soho, came back with something leather. He was discussing a proposal with one of my male counterparts, and when I came in, he looked up and seemed to somehow see the wall behind me, as if my form was pocked with small seeing holes. He'd changed his mind, he said. He didn't want to give it to his wife. He wanted to give it to me. I felt water building through me, the sudden seizure of a torrent reaching a weir. In the office bar that night, I drank steadily, the clear liquid running down my chin. My male counterpart, who'd been in the room when it had happened, came over and spoke slowly to me, touched my hips and bottom as if now, finally, he understood the roles. We'd been almost friends before, but there was a slickness between us now, as of cold custard or car oil. The conference was an important time of the year. One of the other people on my team who'd been there before said the hotel was reported to be haunted, and that's why we always went there. Sometimes there were themed evenings where we dressed as ghosts or vampires. There were lectures and chaired discussions, and at night we congregated in the bar. The bosses went and played golf at a nearby course in the day, but in the evenings they appeared in our midst. Foxes in the chicken coop. The memories from the night before were often hazy, like repeatedly driving into fog. One of the bosses had a casual air to him, came to the bar without a tie or a jacket, would buy rounds of drinks for everyone, make jokes. In the corridor, after a long night, I was hunting for my room when I found him. Oh, he found me. God, he was drunk, he said, although something about his face made me wonder. I was drunk. He had taken a few of us behind the bar and mixed us all drinks, more spirit than mix. As a joke, he'd been wearing a pair of fake fangs, but he wasn't wearing them any longer. He laughed and said he'd help me find my room. He put his arm around me, and I felt the start of unease, his soft fingers on the back of my neck. I remembered my room number then, became certain we were going the wrong way. I started making excuses, muttering, laughing to cover my fear. I stank of fear. He raised his hands in the air, let me go, kissed the corner of my mouth, went back towards the bar. I saw them in the bathroom. In the long nights of drinking, I would often go there to hide, try to sober up a bit. The bathroom had full-length gilded mirrors and soft velvet-cushioned chairs. The round circle of my mouth, the mirrors reflecting the mirrors, and in the reflection, things moving. Crowds of things. Like flies or ants. Little exhalations which revealed differently coloured arms or legs. The grey edge of a pencil skirt, the tip of a high-heeled shoe. I began seeing them more and more, these half-things. They whispered through the hotel doorways each time someone opened them. They gathered around the coffee cups and the chairs in the hall as we watched the lectures. They lay on the floor so that sometimes it seemed as if everyone was ploughing through a sludge of disenchanted light. Flashes of image. They began to solidify, which was frightening because they looked very like me, or like the other women at the conference. At times they were so clear I could make out the designer label on the back of a dress or smell the coffee on their breath. They were all women. I knew this by their perfume, but also by the way they never quite seemed to be visible. By the fingers which sometimes pressed gently down on top of my own on the keyboard so that I would type a letter multiple times. A, 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 A. No one else seemed to notice them. Their movements began to be stronger, more aggressive. When I stumbled back to my room at the end of the day, they mobbed me with their rushes of air bodies, their pattering hands, which sometimes somehow managed to make contact with a smacking sound on my face. They piled on top of me, and to begin with there was comfort in their weight, but in the night I would wake and would be suffocating beneath them. I had sensed them in the office, but in the hotel they were impossible to ignore. Sometimes I could hear them, the murmur of their small talk, their polite giggles. They hounded me, and as they did, I began to notice that I would be standing in line at the bar for hours because people kept moving in front of me as if they couldn't see me. Sometimes one of the bosses who came and went would fire a lewd remark in my general direction, and I would feel relieved. They could see me. But when 3 or 4 women behind me answered, I would realise that the request had not been to me, but only someone a little like me. The last night at the hotel I felt sick and had to keep going to the bathroom to touch my face in the mirror. The lost women clustered around me, pushed their barely there arms inside the sleeves of my cardigan. I hadn't drunk anything, but there was the doubling beat of a drunk pulse in my chest, and when I opened my mouth, I stank of stale beer. They hustled more aggressively, and I began to feel the pain from their movements, the pressure of their nails against my eyelids. They were warning me. I waded out of the bathroom, pushing them aside. The bar was cattle full, very loud. I raised my voice to the pitch of a scream and let it ring out, tinkling the champagne glasses. No one looked around. The lost women rained their steady weight down onto me, and I caved beneath it, and then was gone.
Jessica.